transitional fossils due to the fact that how do you know it's a transitional fossil? How do you know it wasn't a species? Okay, so I just regard all transitional fossils as being another species, which we just have far less fossils for. But I don't want to get into this stinky issue. All I want to say is that the transitional fossils are not evidence for evolution, because there's been some that look like that have been found, and I don't know why creationists keep denying this. There's some that look like it, but the problem is says who? Just because you find something between this species and that species, show me the causal proof, the causal link that one is the ancestor of the other and one is the predecessor of the other. So one is in between. The transitional one is between the other two. Nobody can do it. The whole thing is philosophical mush, needs to be thrown away, and nobody should even be discussing this, really. At least if you want to discuss things empirically, or if you do, admit that you're discussing wild philosophy and then start there rather than think you're discussing science. So all I know is they don't prove anything for or against evolution, and they don't prove anything for or against creationism. They're just another fossil of another creature. If you have a horse fossil and you call it a species, might as well call the transitional fossil a species, because that's all you know. You have a hunk of bone found there, and you say it's at some point in the past, and that's about, you have no way of saying, oh, I know this was just very temporary creature or not. Okay, what if you find 50 zillion more of the supposed transitional fossils in this new fossil area somewhere in Russia next week? Okay, so then it's not a transitional fossil anymore. So the whole thing is it's not part of this debate today. I'm not introducing it, and I think people have been misled in being so focused on it. There's just not enough evidence to discuss it in coherent terms. Now, in exploring the fossil record, I'm going to go back and forth between what creationists, what one camp says and what the other says. Okay, so I'm going to start off with creationist. If I go to Google and just type in fossil record, evidence for evolution, I get a number of sites. The one shows up here on the first page, christiananswers.net. Pretty interesting site. They've got a lot. See, they point out a lot of the stuff the evolutionists don't point out. They've got right here the first point. They got a bunch of bullet points, like 8 of them. The first one is punctuated equilibrium. They call it the abrupt appearance of animals. That's it, right there. So I just got done saying not many people are pointing out what I pointed out about punctuated equilibrium contradicting evolution or natural selection. But like I said, other people have to do it. And here's an example right here. You don't hear the evolutionists pointing out simple logical reasoning. It's like saying A causes B, and we're going to assert B is true, and then later you find out A doesn't exist. Okay, gradualist evolution is what A is. But then you still hold B, even though A caused B, according to your reasoning. That make any sense? No, it doesn't. See, natural selection, you can't assert natural selection causes punctuated change rather than gradualist change in evolution. And the simple reason is because nobody has a clue how natural selection wouldn't do that, how it would do that. And as I've said before, you can't start asserting solar flares and stuff do it. I explained why that's the case on past shows. The basic reason is you can't get the mutations to line up properly for reproducing pairs to exist. It's too unlikely. It's too much of a chance, crazy scenario. But anyway, I discussed it in a past show, so I'm not going to now. But anyway, let's go to the last bullet point here that they have. They've got a lot of good points here. Rapid coal formation, fast stratiformation, fossilization requires very special conditions, sufficient fossils, animals unchanged, plants appear too abruptly. These are all the big ones that the evolutionists, comes from their data. What the evolutionists have discovered is like the more what the evolutionists discover, the more we find problems, and we point them out, because I'm of course on the creationist camp, and they just say, oh, you're crazy. Well, okay, tell us about punctuated equilibrium then. Anyways, the last point that they have here in christiananswers.net, wrong order for evolution, it's their smallest point. It has been reported that 80 to 85% of the Earth's land surface does not have even 3 geological periods appearing in, quote, correct, unquote, consecutive order for evolution. The fossil record does not provide evidence to support evolution. So this is what, on the creationist side, is widely discussed. To say they basically say, okay, the academics and the experts say there's this fossil evidence where you basically have the idea that the Earth is very, very old, and you can look in the strata layers. Where if you look on the side of a hill, there's strata layers, and at the bottom are the oldest because that's where things settled out then, and you gradually get younger and younger and younger, and the most simple organisms are at the bottom, and things get much more complex in the fossils you find near the top. So there's a progression through time from from simple to much, much more complexity. So then we'd have a scenario not where a creator put all the code-bearing creatures on Earth and code-bearing species on Earth just at a certain time or progression of times. They say, oh no, you have a sequence of creatures existing through time, and instead of a creator, they get real mad and say, oh, you can't assert the existence of an invisible creator putting all those creatures there. Instead, what they want to assert is the existence of an invisible mechanism, the unknown, invisible, amazing process of how species change into one another. So they get real upset about asserting the existence of an invisible God, but it's okay to assert the existence of the invisible mechanism. Nobody has a clue what it is. They usually say natural selection and fall dead into a contradiction that I guess they don't want to point out. I guess they want to live in contradiction instead, and think that punctuated equilibrium works with natural selection. If they could invent another mechanism, another wild theory for what causes species change in a punctuated instance, well, maybe then we wouldn't have the contradiction. At least we'd have another ad hoc theory. But they haven't even done that, to my knowledge, in any widespread way. So again, it's a mechanismless theory, evolution is. Okay, so now let's go to the other angle. I want to find someone arguing for the fossil record. Now I'm on YouTube. I'd like to just play a clip of someone. That's just the first thing I thought of. And there's so many creationists on here with YouTube videos. The fossil record proves creation. There's a big stink about this. There's a big deal here going on. A lot of creationists yelling pretty loud that there's something wrong here. But let me find a and I basically looked up in YouTube atheist fossil record, those three terms. I figured that would get me to some scientist or something discussing the fossil record against creationism. I don't know if this means anything, but the whole first page of YouTube basically has nothing except creationists just covered with creation. Last Atlas of Creation, the fossil record refutes. Oh, here's one. The fossil record, intermediate forms are abundant. Oh, brother. Okay. I want to find one talking about the different arrangements of strata. Here's one. The collapse of evolution, series of like 10 videos. Fossil record shatters Darwinism. There's a lot behind this, but I'm trying to find someone arguing for the fossil record. The whole first 2 pages of YouTube don't have a single video of someone specifically showing the progression of the more and more complex layers of strata. Just massive creationist videos everywhere. Now you might say, oh, that's because there's more creationist videos there on YouTube, or something to do with YouTube's search analytics. That's not my case. From when I usually look up something from Google or YouTube, there's usually several different types of things represented. Never in a crazy imbalance like this. I mean, obviously we should be having. What does this mean? I don't know what this means. Let me just move on. All right, I'm doing a different search here. Atheist fossil record. I added strata. I just couldn't find anything. I did a search before the show as well, trying to find stuff. Well, I'm just looking again here. There's nothing. It's hard to find anything. I looked before the show. Let's go over to Google here and see what we can find. All right, on the first page of Google, I looked up. I used fossil record strata in Google. The first page, I have what appears to be some notes from a Geology 104 class, Dinosaurs and Natural History, from the University of Maryland. So let's see what our professors are teaching our undergraduates here. Sedimentary rocks, I'm just a little bit down the page here. Sedimentary rocks, because they are deposited naturally, form horizontal layers, strata, singular stratum. Because of their layered form, strata allow geologists to determine relative time, that is sequence, of deposition of each layer, and thus the relative age of the fossils in each layer. And then he's got 3 bullet points here. The principle of original horizontality. Because strata are deposited under gravity, they form horizontal layers. You listen to this. If the strata no longer appear horizontal, something has disturbed the sediments after they became rocks. He or she has after, assuming this is the professor, of course, writing this, in all caps. Like to demand that they believe that. Okay, of course, that's we didn't see the sediments form, so he's asking us to believe this on faith, that this is what happened. I think the only strata we really see form, like the Grand Canyon's a good example. Sorry, Grand Canyon. Mount St. Helens is a good example of where we've seen strata form, and wow, is that a story and challenge for old Earth